start?
Sure. Thanks, Cole, for helping to lead this discussion. So I'm Cynthia, a postdoc in HCII, and I was excited to invite Emily Ackerman to speak with us today. So Emily is a PhD student at the University of Pittsburgh's Chemical and Petroleum Engineering Department. She's here to talk to us today about something a little bit different, about her experience with, there was a deployment of delivery robots in Pittsburgh last fall. And Emily kind of had an experience and tweeted about it and wrote an article about it. And so we're excited to hear from her to kind of think about questions related to robotics and what it means for these devices to kind of be in public in terms of accessibility or not. So I'll just let Emily talk, and then we'll have a Q&A after Emily finishes. Cool, thanks.
All right. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so yeah, thank you, Cindy, for inviting me. Just for reference, these slides are on my website if you need them to follow along. emilyackerman.netlify.com. So I thought I would start by giving a little briefing on who I am, because I'm not sitting in front of you. So I am a PhD student at the University of Pittsburgh. Typically, I'm a systems biologist by work. And what that means is I do basically a very small amount of a lot of things. So math, engineering, control systems, I've done robotics, and biology. And the other important thing to know about me, as you can see in this photo, is that I'm a lifetime wheelchair user. I've had one since I was 5 or 6, and that's me in a nutshell. And basically, the reason I'm here, although being disabled kind of gives you enough qualification to talk about this, in my opinion, I had a run-in with these robots. So these are Starship Technologies robots. They are food delivery, automated food delivery. So they are kind of employed by Pitt. They are picking up food from the dining services, and then they're automated driving it to students at their dorms or their classes or wherever they are. And last summer, they sort of just appeared out of nowhere. They were being trained originally with a human, but they were totally unmarked like they are in this photo. And then one day, the humans were gone, and they were still unmarked for a while, and they were just there. And there wasn't like a public release or anything about really what their purpose was. We kind of found out after some time, but they were just kind of there. And so you may have seen me end up on the news when I had them momentarily off the streets for a short period of time. So what happened was, this is the intersection at Forbes and Bigelow, so it's like right down the street from CMU. I was crossing kind of in this direction to the Shenley Plaza side. And I like this photo because there's a lot of people in it, and that's kind of how it was that day, where I couldn't really see the street in front of me. I was just waiting behind a lot of people, and people started crossing the street, so I followed them. And when I got in the street, I realized that the robot was sitting in the curb cut on the other side. And I thought, okay, well, it'll move like by the time I get there. But when I got there, the robot was still sitting directly in the curb cut, maybe 3 inches from the edge. It was just directly in the way. And so I was immediately panicked because the walk sign was ending, and I needed to quickly decide, like, did I go all the way back across the street? Do I go, I wish I had thought of going around the corner. And I just panicked. I was like sitting in front of it, and I knew that sitting in front of it wasn't gonna make it move. And so I ended up hopping the part of the curb cut that's sloping up, which is dangerous for me because I could get stuck pretty easily. It's also painful to have such a sharp jolt to my body. And I turned around and it was just still sitting there. And I crossed the next street over and it was still sitting where I left it. And I was just so upset that this like robot had put me in danger. I was stuck in the street. And so I did what any millennial would do, which is I wrote angry tweets. Love doing that. And they're basically outlining, they're too small to put on here, basically outlining what was wrong and how this non-sentient robot was causing a major accessibility issue for me and a lot of people, and causing potential danger. And for some accountability, I also tagged both the company and the university, who responded fairly quickly, and they pulled the robots off the street, essentially, that day. And what happened from there can only be described as just this wild series of events that happened to me. The tweets, as you can see, blew up. So there's 3,000 retweets and 4,000 likes. And this reached a lot of different corners of the internet. So first it reached this like sympathizing, worrying crowd. And I wanna like look at a few examples of these. Of people tagging their own universities who had also signed contracts with the same company. So here's University of Wisconsin. Here's someone asking about their city because they have them as well. Here's a picture of one at Berkeley. It's a different robot, but it's sitting in exactly the same dangerous spot where it's directly in the middle of the tactile pavers on the curb cut. Someone else from Berkeley talking about how they're hogging the ramps. George Mason saying that students and staff have both complained about problems with wheelchairs. And then another example from Madison later, where the robot is sitting in a ramp and people are trying to walk around it, which I can tell you from experience means that that robot is sitting still, blocking an entire ramp. And if I came up upon it, I would have to back down the ramp because the robot wouldn't move. Right, so this was a very worrying thing to see. This was not a single incident that I discovered. But on the other hand, I was getting responses from the design crowd who were really upset and were talking about diverse groups in design. And then the disabled crowd who was really upset and was trying to get the word out because we're always coming up on new things that are causing accessibility issues. And then lastly, this crowd of like well-meaning people who were sometimes kind of ableist and were like, why do we even need food robots? Which, I mean, in their best iteration, I would love to have a food robot. It would be great for disabled people, but this kind of well-meaning, like, people are lazy crowd that responded. And so from this grew a bunch of news articles. Here's Pitt News, Action 4, the NPR station, and the Post-Gazette. I talked to all of them within the first 2 days, I want to say. And in that time, I was conversing with the university and the company who had kind of explained to me that it was a bug and that the robot should be sitting behind the curb cut, and was kind of trying to get me to, you know, to talk about it, and I was happy to talk about it. But also in that time, what happened was the company had initially issued a statement of apology to me, and then they, the next day, issued a retraction and said that they were happy to see that I got around it after watching the video, which I did, and I was clear that I did. And they basically included like another commitment of, you know, we are here for the disability community. We have worked with these groups, XYZ. And that caused a lot of backlash at me for quote unquote lying, which I didn't. I always got around it. I never said I was harmed. I was raising an issue, a very dangerous issue, potentially. And the internet turned into this very scary place of like, well, you didn't get hit by a car, right? Like, you didn't die. Like, you ruined this good thing for us. Come back when like you're in the hospital. And I woke up to all these really vile comments and memes. And it was just, it was like a 180. And it was a very small part of the internet, but a very obtrusive part in my mind, because I doubted myself and how I felt about being in danger and not being safe to walk around my own campus. And the Post-Gazette issued an editorial written by the staff that was basically commending me for starting the conversation and saying that though I've caused a dust up, they say, this conversation is good and needs to carry on. So that was really a really kind of welcoming thing to see. And out of this, after the first couple days, came an even wilder experience. So I was asked to write an op-ed, which I did. I've been interviewed for National Geographic. It will be out this year at some point. The South Korean English news station contacted me. I wasn't able to interview with them, but I thought it was really cool. I was the feature in the Financial Times article for designing AI that eliminates disability bias. I'm in a law review. I was interviewed for someone writing the legal implications of autonomous food delivery. That's very specific. And then I got a lot of emails like this that say, "Hi Emily, the delivery robots are currently traveling around the redacted campus and have already endangered one of my advisees' lives. He's in a wheelchair." This is a direct quote, but I got a bunch of these. And so the big question after like all of this shook out was just like, how did we get here? Like, how did this happen? What am I doing? This was like a life-changing event for me. And after some thought, I've kind of narrowed it down to two major questions that kind of fall out of this, how did we get here? So the first is, how is technology so actively inaccessible, right? So the cousin of these food delivery robots is these dockless motorized razor scooters. They're in a lot of cities, and you ride them, they charge you like an Uber. And the fact that you can pick it up and drop it off without a dock means that they're often just in the sidewalk. And there isn't just one, there's like 10 or 20. And they're on their side, people knock them down, they don't care. And I can't pick them up and I can't walk over them, right? Suddenly the sidewalk is completely unusable. Similarly, websites with informational images. So here's a screenshot of a website where it says the menu is available, but it's a PDF, right? There's no plain text. A screen reader can't read it. Suddenly, like, the most basic website isn't usable for the visually impaired. And then for the hard of hearing, subtitles are unreliable and non-existent in a world where video media is not only important, but like sometimes the best way to get news. And you can take this even further and say, how are accessible solutions so inaccessible? So here's an Xbox controller. And then last year, I think they came out with this adaptive Xbox controller for disabled people with bigger buttons. It's just a really great invention. And so you realize it costs almost twice as much, right? That's a barrier for a lot of people. And my two least favorite accessible solutions are the exoskeleton and the stair climbing wheelchair, which are really great technological feats. But first, they cost $40,000. You have to pre-order them. You can't just get them through your insurance, right? And second, they're putting the burden on the user and not the environment. So if you can't buy a $40,000 wheelchair and nobody puts stairs or a ramp in because people have stair climbing wheelchairs, what are you supposed to do, right? Suddenly accessible solutions are really inaccessible. And so when we think about this, we can think about like the tech solutions themselves being behind, and we can also think about just people. And this is something I know the answer to, sadly, but how can people with disabilities still be so far behind, right? So if you think about the world, this is an estimate, but 1 billion people are disabled. That's 15% about. The median earnings for a disabled adult is $21,000 compared to the $31,000 that an able adult makes. And internet use, 54% of disabled people have the access, where 81% of able people do. And these are important factors when we think about things like education. If we look at STEM specifically, in undergrads, it's 11% are disabled, which is less than the amount in the world. That's not a great reflection already. And something really sad, doctoral degrees, only 6.8% in STEM are awarded to disabled people. And so when we look at the tech industry, maybe things are starting to make more sense with this context, right? So Google, 7.5% of Google employees self-identify as being disabled, which is nowhere near 15%, which we would like to see if we were representing the world. It's also worth noting that 2019 is the first year that Google reported this statistic. And I did some Googling, and I was really disappointed to see that the trend is that companies, tech companies, will have a web page or will make a pledge to disability inclusion and talk about how important it is. And yet they don't provide employment statistics to really prove their commitment to this population, right? So I did some Googling. Here's a list of companies who have a website but don't provide the statistic, essentially. So IBM, Amazon, who wrote this article about why they choose to include, as if choosing was a choice and including makes them good. Oracle, who is responsible for creating the software that tracks which of your employees are disabled. Facebook, which, another comical thing, they won the 2018, my cat's crying. Poppy, please stop crying. The 2018 Best Place to Work for Being Disabled, and yet their diversity report doesn't even include the word disability in it. Love to see that. Uber, Apple, and Microsoft. And I don't have all day, but you get the idea, right? is really a problem where there's this like pledge for inclusion and accessibility, and yet there's no proof. And so I think it's interesting in the context that disabled people are more likely to be reliant on tech to live their life for basic needs. And so, like, nowadays we think of tech as the future and like robotics and AI and whatever futuristic technologies you want to dream of. But we can think of tech as being just any kind of solution to a problem. And so in 1960, this bus with a lift would have been extremely technologically advanced. Right? This was very rare. And if you want to go back even further, every fourth grader learns that a simple machine built the pyramids, right? A ramp. And so we can think about tech as any level of our version of tech commitment. It can be incredibly simple and have huge advantages. And one of my favorite examples of this kind of limited access is Ed Roberts. So Ed Roberts was the first student at Berkeley in a wheelchair. This is a picture of him in 1962 when he started. Sorry, no, this is later than that. But he started in 1962. And he also used an iron lung. So he was super reliant on technology for the most basic human needs. And he applied to Berkeley, and first they told him that they had tried, quote unquote, the disabled before. But he didn't give up, and he got them to agree to let him come and they forced him to live in a hospital. So they didn't treat him as a student, even when he got there. But it was the only way to have access to the tech that he needed. But he went on to fight this really good fight for adding curb cuts to the city because he couldn't get to class. So this incredibly simple technology of a ramp, a curb cut, is what led him to have access to go to school, right? And he had to fight that fight for himself. And he fought it also for everyone else. This is a picture, one of my favorites from later in, I think, Denver, where people in wheelchairs are sledgehammering the sidewalk out of the street. I really love this picture. But this is, again, simple technology. And another example is just buses, public transportation. People had to lay down in front of buses and protest to get access to this technology that allowed them to go to work, to be educated, to have a family and friends, right? Like, this wasn't legally, I guess, certified until the 70s, early 70s. And it wasn't enforced until the 90s. So this is the ADA Capitol Crawl. It's this famous where people with disabilities dragged themselves up the stairs of the Capitol to protest the ADA not being passed right before it was passed. And I'm not here to like give a legal lesson. Obviously, that's not what anyone wants. But it's important because this directly relates to what I'm talking about. So the ADA covers employment, public entities, accommodations, and telecommunications, right? So this is tech, this is education, this is going to work. And it wasn't guaranteed until 30 years ago, right? So, and even then, there's this language of reasonable accommodations, readily achievable, easily accomplished. And these are loopholes that companies, tech, and any other, and schools and things use to deny access to this day, right? So the ADA is ever relevant to this kind of talk. But I can't say it's too bad because here I am graduating high school in 2011 after having an IEP. I went to public school. here I am graduating undergrad. I applied to grad school by writing about why I wanted to be a disabled scientist, essentially. I didn't have to fear discrimination. And ultimately, like, here I am now doing science, right? Like, this is not something that people would have had access to or dreamed of in the not very distant past. And I'm very thankful for that and for the ADA. But I think one of the most blaring problems that we have shows up in the tech industry, and that's air transportation. So air travel is a very large tech industry, and it falls under the Air Carriers Act, which results in a lot of things like this. So here's two pictures. The first is a man. He is strapped into a very institutional-looking temporary wheelchair, and next to him is his wheelchair that looks a lot like mine, that costs tens of thousands of dollars, but it's destroyed. So the back is ripped off, the wheels, the controls are ripped off, there's random parts laying in the chair. It wouldn't be functional, it wouldn't work at all. And the second picture is another similar wheelchair where the wheel has been entirely ripped off in a not fixable immediately way. And this is common, and the problem is that there's no private cause of action. So these people cannot sue the airline themselves. And that's an even bigger problem when you realize that in a month, 700 wheelchairs get damaged. This is such a fear for me that it's going to impact my career, right? So up until this point, I haven't flown on an airplane. I can't go to conferences. I don't know what I'm going to do for job talks, right? So this is a huge barrier for me and everyone else, because after decades and decades of existing, this technology has yet to guarantee like the respect that we deserve and the safety for us and our tech that we use every day. It doesn't exist. And so that's just one example of the way I kind of want to phrase this, is that the present is already really scary. And that means the future is even scarier, because we don't know where the future is going. Like, is it going to be the Jetsons? Are we headed for the Jetsons? It seems like maybe we are, but maybe it's like a little more eugenics-y than the Jetsons at this point. And the problem is, like, if we are headed for the Jetsons, who's driving the spaceship? Like, how do I get to be in charge of the spaceship? And this is kind of the question I think about a lot, and I think it's time to bring up maybe the one valid criticism of this kind of talk, which is, where are the disabled people? Like, people say, oh, I'd hire them if I could find them. Like, they're not applying, so like, it's not my fault, right? But I think what I've tried to convey here is that this poor representation that we see is actually caused by inaccessibility at two different levels. So first, it's that we don't have equal access to tech, right? We don't have the internet equally. We can't go to school equally. We don't have any of the guarantee that most people have. And you need all of those things to get access to the industry, to survive the education, to get the job, to work your way up the job. And so as a result, the current state of the tech industry is that the people who work in it have to anticipate the needs of the users. Even people that they've never met, that they have no idea what their life is like, because they're the only ones there at the moment. And that's not a good setup. And it's not the way that I want it to be. My goal would be a future where first, the developers that are abled aren't responsible for foreseeing these problems because the tech industry would reflect the population of the world, and everyone would kind of be responsible for their own experience, and then it's great if you see someone else's. And second, that the burden doesn't fall on the user to have protest or to rely on the good faith of the company to listen to that protest and to work to better the solution. And so at this point, I kind of want to shift everyone's thinking into the fact that this is just a temporary problem, right? We don't have to keep doing this if we're constantly working at it. And I'm an engineer, so I think about everything in terms of feedback. So this is a positive feedback loop. So all of our kind of goal is better tech, right? We all want to make better solutions. To me, and I hope to everyone, that means a more accessible solution. And when we do that, we grant people access to education, among a lot of things, but this education is what's going to gain that representation in schools. And those people are going to enter the pipeline, into the industry, and they're going to create better tech for themselves and for people like them. And it's just going to keep feeding back on itself. And this is the way I kind of frame my thoughts about this problem. And now's kind of the part where I have to say, like, the solution, right? Except there isn't a set solution. I'm one person, right? But these are my thoughts kind of about 3 steps that we can take in order to kind of amp up this feedback process. So the first is a no-brainer. The industry must diversify. So multi-level involvement in this design process is key. So here's an example of the engineering design process. I'm sure that any design field has something similar, where first you ask a question, like, who is my user? What is this? You imagine different solutions you could create. You plan which one you're going to make, and then you create it and you test it over and over, right? Pretty familiar process. And there's questions that we can ask at each level. So first, all of you probably ask, who is the user? What are their needs? What do they want out of this product, right? But an important note is that if you're designing for the public, which a lot of things are, then the public includes the disabled, right? So actively thinking about that. Second is, how will the disabled be affected? What will these options, how will they affect this group of people? And then when you choose a solution, asking if it's serving those groups. And this could be for any minority group being served by a product. And then in the testing phase, what is the user feedback? Again, this is really important for kind of hearing from the masses what's going on. And the current state of tech isn't asking all of these questions in a way that I think is sufficient. Most of the disability feedback tends to rest on this testing phase where they're waiting for the public to interface with the product, or they're doing like a focus group maybe. And it's already the end of the pipeline, right? You've already like gone through the whole design process. Whereas the more disabled people in the process, working higher up the chain, is going to ask these questions about themselves, right? So if I'm designing a product and ask who's the user, I'm probably going to think about myself, right? We're all self-centered. And so asking how people will be disabled or will be affected, it's easier if you are disabled to think about other disabled people and to have a variety of disabled people working, to have different perspectives is really important. Having one token disabled worker is not enough. And so it's important because inaccessible solutions are harmful. So first of all, it's a waste of time to make an inaccessible solution, but it's not just neutral for the user, right? It's an actively harmful thing to create a product that doesn't work for someone, for a large group of people, that is potentially dangerous for them. And it's harmful even if it's accidental, you didn't mean it, if it's a bug or whatever, which is what happened to me, or if you had no ill intention, right? So a big response I got was like, oh, well, we made this with like disabled people in mind, right? The robots could be good for you. They could deliver you medicine, which is great. And I would love to have a robot that did that. But I don't deserve to be collateral in the meantime. And the solution is just not accessible to me, no matter how good your intention is, right? And that's why kind of diversifying further up the chain is so useful. It also gives you greater recognition of voluntary versus involuntary users. So in my case, I was actually not the user. So if you're asking design process questions about who is the user, but your product is being thrown into public, then suddenly the public is the user, whether or not I'm paying to use it. And so the problem was I didn't ask for it, right? I didn't ask to be blocked. I didn't ask to have it in front of me. And yet I'm a user somehow. So diversifying is going to, again, allow for this wider perspective on who's using your product. The second point is probably the most controversial point, that the industry has to slow down. And I get that this is just a problem that we've created for ourselves as researchers and as product designers. But the point is that a harmful solution isn't good because it's first, right? Like I spend all my time trying to be first at doing my research and everything. But if you're making a product and throwing it into public when it's not ready to be there, it's still harmful. It's still not doing any good. And from my perspective, and from the perspective of a lot of disabled people, we don't want to rely on reactionary legislation, which is typically what we have to do. So, for example, in my case, I'm really worried about the rights that are being lobbied for and granted to pedestrian robots, right? So in several states, this type of robot that I ran into already has pedestrian rights. And as I mentioned, with the ADA, with all of these like reasonable words and what is accessible to them, I have a lot of worry that it will very quickly turn into technology with rights against me without adequate protections of who gets to say like what space belongs to who. Do I have rights over the robot for using that sidewalk? It's a really like terrible question to have to ask, and it's an ethical question that needs to be thought of in design. And I know that's not what drives design a lot of the time, but I don't want to be in a place where I'm waiting for legislation to protect me when I have to live my life and go to work, right? So designing solutions with ethics in mind is a really important step in this, at least if not slowing down, changing the thinking. And the last point on this kind of topic is that I speak for a lot of, I think, people when I say that we don't have good faith anymore. The commitment from a tech company or from any institution that says that they are committed to our community is great until there's no proof of it, right? And I don't need to sit around and wait for that proof. I don't deserve to be waiting around for it. So we don't need to trust in good faith. Move fast, break things is great for science and for tech and for making money and making strides for society. But when it comes at the expense of the marginalized, that's when it really is going to be a problem. And we're fast approaching that. If not, we've already got past it. The last point I want to make is about education. And this could be its own talk. So I'm not saying that all of you are responsible for the lack of education in the statistics that I show you. But I think that this conversation is really important to have as a community of researchers and educators, because we are the ones who are on the ground doing stuff, and this needs to be kind of a collective effort for education that can start with simple things like your company or your department or your community, right? So opportunities don't just hand themselves to anyone, let alone disabled people who have trouble finding accessible REUs or research labs that do computational work, or access to tools like screen readers and things. It's like, what can you do for your department to make it more accessible for your students or your coworkers to be there? This one's more general. Do your children have disabled role models? Because your kids are going to grow up one day to be doing lots of things, but maybe in tech, right? And why not start now showing them what tech can do for people and what access it gives them, and how tech is actually providing this accessibility for them. Like having this conversation is super important. And the last is really hard. How can you make your work less of a black box? So, for example, when I ran into the robot, I had seen it around. I knew what its function was. And I have some robotics training. So I knew that, for example, sitting in front of the robot, it wasn't going to move, right? That was how, if it sensed something in front of it, it wasn't going to be able to move. And I knew it wasn't going to back up. So I didn't sit in front of it. But most people don't have that level of robotics understanding, or any kind of tech understanding, I'd say. And when these robots were put out into Pitt's campus, there was no release of information about what they did, how they worked, what you should expect, what you shouldn't do, right? So if you're placing something into the world, I ask you all to think about how you can make your work less of a black box. How can you make it more accessible for anyone to understand? Because public education is the future of tech, right? We all need to understand, if we're hurtling toward this technological future, we really need to bring everyone along in every way that we can. So as a closing thought, I just want to remind you that this is a temporary problem, and that I ask that we in the disability community need recognition of our experience, access to ethical solutions that are equitable for everyone, and a commitment from you and everyone in tech to actively bring us inside to make sure that this is a temporary problem. So I thank you for listening, and I'm happy to have any kind of discussion. I think this is just the beginning of this kind of discussion. So any thoughts, you can email me. We can ask questions now. I'm open to anything.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily.
Yeah.
And I think y'all have a raise hand button. So if you would like to ask a question, feel free to activate that, and Cole will recognize you.
Well, I will try to do that.
Oh.
I just don't know how yet. Hang on. I have to, where do I see raised hands?
If you go to participants.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Patrick, do you want to start?
Patrick might be clapping.
Oh.
Yeah, the icon for the hand and clapping are both blue, which is easy to confuse.
Oh yeah. I was clapping.
If someone raises their hand, they move to the top of the participants list if they raise their hand.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Stephanie's hand is raised.
Yeah, Stephanie.
Yes. So, hi, Emily, and hi, everybody. Thank you so much for your talk. I'm so glad we were able to have you in Accessibility Lunch, because these are, so I'm a PhD student in human-computer interaction, and I am thinking about how the lack of access to communication devices for people who have who want to use a speech generation device to communicate is super important, and it comes from all the way back, when they were able to access it for the first time. And I'm also not from the US, so in Colombia we don't have the ADA, and we don't have all of this disability history that makes things here accessible right now. But I just wanted to thank you, because I think these are all important points to think about the context of where we are, what are the resources available to us to design with, and I was thinking about the industry needing to slow down point that you made, and I was wondering how maybe if you have reflected, because you also a PhD student and also a scientist, what's that tension to maybe what are some things we can think about when we kind of want to get far ahead because we're excited, we are passionate about our field, but at the same time, yeah, how could we manage that tension between having the curiosity and the scientific ideas, and then also acknowledging that we, especially in HCI, I think in robotics, we have such things that can translate to products really fast. So how can we manage that tension? I was just curious about it.
Yeah, I think that's a really tough industry question, right? I think in time it will come organically, where we have increased that level of involvement from different diverse groups into the process, so that it won't need to be a conscious or so much of a conscious thought. As for now, I think just a constant check-in is a really important tool in all levels of that design process. So maybe even amping up that testing feedback phase in the meantime, before we can kind of infiltrate into the field, because in my case with the robots, they had tested with a group of visually people in the UK first, in a very model kind of way, in a town that had perfect sidewalks and all kinds of good conditions, and they had also talked to a disability group here. I'm not sure the extent, but they had mentioned that they had basically asked them like if they could reach inside of it to get food out if they ordered from it. But I think there's never enough testing. Clearly, like that level of testing wasn't enough, or they were afraid to say that they thought there could be problems, because I could see that easily. Like you're standing in front of someone who's showing you their baby, right? Like you're not gonna.
Yeah.
This is dangerous to me. So any form of testing, increasing feedback channels, anonymous feedback, would be a great tool. Yeah, as much as possible. But really just keeping in mind that ethical and diverse thinking earlier in the process.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Yeah. So
You're muted, Aaron.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't in the window, so my space bar wasn't turning my mic on. I just want to follow up on something Emily said to kind of make this kind of clear about the software industry. In the hardware industry, quite often, the costs of getting something wrong are higher because you have to retool your system and rebuild your system and so forth. And so, it's not surprising that they would say, can someone reach into this? That would be the sort of thing that a hardware engineer would ask, because the cost of having to redesign the entire chassis is very high. The software industry traditionally has always been, oh, we can just push out a patch, right? And so there's generally not as much of a pause before a release, because the assumption is, well, we can just push out a patch later. And the cost of making a fix is considered to be lower, which is not necessarily true, but that's the mentality that that separates the difference between the hardware and the software people.
For sure.
And I want to give time for Sai to ask a question.
Yeah, Sai.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. So I think the whole talk was pretty inspiring for me. I think also your solution on the long-term thought process of like integrating engineers with disabilities into a team and then involving them as part of product cycle is definitely the long-term sort of solution for these issues and problems. I feel like it's a good solution, but I also really like the aspect that you talked about, that you not wanting to wait for legislation and then things to have roll out. So on that light, I was wondering if there might be some type of tech solutions or things that might be more accessible to you or other people like you that that could be appropriated more easily or something to sort of get away from the problem a bit. For instance, some of these robots, they work with LiDAR sensors or ultrasound-based sensors, ultrasonic sensors. So I was wondering if there might be, a way to trick the robot into basically thinking that it could go into some other route, or think that there's an obstacle there and then it's replanning the route. So you have basically some type of sensor in your sort of machine or something that could do that, or even just have a kicker that just kicks the robot as it nears you're stuck or something.
Yeah.
Sort of those are some thoughts I had, but yeah.
It's definitely funny that you mentioned kicking it, because part of the Twitter response was it got to the lawyers, and the lawyers were debating if I had the right to damage it because it was. So I like that's very funny. I hope I do have the right. But yeah, I think that's such an interesting question, because yeah, where do we? I mean, my personal tendency is to shift the burden, but the burden towards the maker and not me, right? So the idea of having something on my person to alert the robot is a really great idea. And I've never thought of it, but that is great. If it was easily available and there was no financial cost, and it was just that I had to wear it, right? It got sent to me in the mail or something. Because the minute you have to shift that focus onto the person me having to buy the sensor or needing to like, you know, purchase something or sign up for something. Yeah, that's when we start shifting onto something that I'd rather not see. But this question is really interesting because I do think that there's a way for this to work in my specific example. I don't think that it's an unusable idea. I just think it's not quite ready yet.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you that the burden is getting shifted to you, and I think that's not an ideal solution either. But you know, just in the spirit of like doing something really quickly around these issues, I was just brainstorming there. But yeah, I do agree with you.
Yeah.
Jeff, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah. So Emily, thank you so much for this talk. It was really great.
Yeah, thanks.
I had one question. It might just be a clarification, but I think it leads to a question, which is, I had thought when I read about your story online that the delivery robot had actually, like, its planned strategy was to basically wait in the curb cut. Whereas I think what you said in your talk was that it was described as a bug. And I just wonder if you could clarify that, but then also kind of, there's a broader point there, right? Where, you know, sometimes these situations come up as what the company would say is unintended. So even with the scooters that are like littered on the street, right? They say, oh, we're not intending for them to be littered on the street. We tell people not to do that. So I thought that might be a question you could have thoughts on.
Yeah, so the part about where it's supposed to be, so it was unclear at the time, right? So when I tweeted about it, I said that they wait in the curb cuts because they do sometimes. But when I talked to the company after, which was too late, they told me that the purpose is that they wait behind the curb cut. And that's why it was a bug, considered a bug. And they told me that they fixed the mapping and they fixed it, whatever. Because I forgot to mention that the robots were back out in 4 days. So it was only 4 days off the street. And so yeah, part of that is my like crusade for public education, right? Like I didn't know where it was supposed to be. I just knew it was not good that it was where it was. And if I had known, I probably would have still yelled about it, but like it would have made more sense to me. Like, oh, there's something wrong. Whereas like my immediate thought was like, this is bad. They must all do this. I must be very concerned about my safety, which was a correct response, but I didn't know, right? So yeah. And then what was the second part?
I guess the second part was, I mean, I guess the broader question is, I mean, I guess it just to really just make it concise, does it matter whether it was a bug or it was an unintended use? And I guess it doesn't matter, but yeah.
Unfortunately for them, it doesn't matter. I don't care. That sounds harsh, but like, I have things to do, right? I have school to go to and a job, and I need to go places, and I don't need something endangering my life on the sidewalk, right? So it's harsh, but true that unintended consequences must be atoned for, you know?
By the way, when they say it's a bug, that might not be actually a bug in software. It might be a bug in training or policy setting.
Figured in like the mapping of it, right?
Yeah. Well, so someone made a decision on how a robot waits at the intersection, and they probably made the decision to square up with the ramp so that it would be easier from a robotics perspective, and they'd have a bigger field of view. And so they either trained it to, so that's not a correct strategy because then you're blocking the direct ramp upwards. They should always, the positioning to the side is what they should have done from the beginning. And from a robotics perspective, that's a big difference. And someone either made a policy decision wrong on the way they set up its curb behavior, or someone trained it when they improperly when they did map the original map and said, this is where you should be when you know, these are the safe spots or something.
Yeah.
So either way, when they say bug, it's not necessarily a software bug. It could have been a decision that someone made that was incorrect.
Absolutely.
Bug is a bit of a catch-all in the robotics industry.
I definitely understand that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we did mention that we would end at 1. So I know Emily was very generous to share her contact information for folks who have remaining questions. But yeah, thanks so much for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I was
Cool.
very excited to be here.
Yeah, well, it's terrible that it happened, you know, so close to us, but also like what a gift that we could have you come visit. So
Definitely.
all right, thanks everybody. These are awkward endings. I guess we end now.
All right, thank you so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Bye.